There are stories that history buries under the weight of disbelief, tales so grotesque, so utterly obscene that scholars prefer to dismiss them as myth or madness, perhaps collecting ancient remains as curiosities. Of course they did, but others whisper that she vanished entirely, absorbed into the very earth of Elmsbrook, becoming one with the forest and the frost, her crystalline beauty staining the stones beneath the roots of the old oak, turning sap to blood and fruit to ash. So if you hear a rustle in the undergrowth and see a fleeting glimpse of something beautiful, yet inhumanly still, do not be fooled by the pale matriarch's wiles. For what is born of ice and death can never truly die. It merely waits, and when the moon is full and the old oak bleeds sap like tears, it remembers. Who could believe such madness? May I recommend our episode on the sadistic countess whose insatiable bloodlust led her to commit some truly horrifying acts? Or for a light affair, we also have an episode on the baffling mystery of the vanishing hitchhiker. Happy haunting, a queen who feasted on the dead. But Elmsbrook's royal crypt tells a quieter story. When opened in 1907 during an archaeological survey, the bodies within had all been tampered with. Limbs missing, flesh torn. No signs of rot, only precision, only hunger, and Margaret's own tomb empty, like many nobles did at the time. But then came the journal of Brother Matloys, a monk who once served as her physician. His writings, later banned by the church, spoke of a tincture brewed from the dust of the embalmed, ground fine and stirred into wine. He believed at first that she was merely ingesting relics in some misguided ritual, but one night, summoned unexpectedly to her private chapel, he saw more than he should. Laid upon a table was the body of a man, thin, yellowed by time, yet remarkably intact, and the queen naked, trembling not in prayer, but in hunger, her teeth sharp as bone daggers pressed to the dry sinew of the corpse's arm. She looked up at him, eyes black with fury, and simply said, "He was a king, once. They last longer." Brother Matloys fled that night and never returned, but his journal made its way into a private archive in Vienna, only to resurface centuries later. But some whispers persist, echoes that refuse to die, that cling to the walls of forgotten crypts and dust-laden scrolls. This is one such story, the tale of Queen Margaret of Elmsbrook, the pale matriarch as she was known, whose pursuit of eternal youth led her down a path darker than rot itself. Elmsbrook, a minor kingdom nestled between the dense woods of old Germania and the frost-bitten steppes of Bohemia, barely made a mark on maps, but in the winter of 1572, its royal court became the stage for a spectacle that would seep into the nightmares of anyone who dared look too closely. Queen Margaret was said to possess an unnatural beauty, not youthful, no, something colder, more crystalline. Her skin was pale as wax, stretched taut across a frame that moved with unnatural grace, her eyes a shade too glassy, her voice soft but strangely damp, like words spoken through mist. She was in her 5th decade, yet looked scarcely 25. Visitors from neighboring courts praised her elegance, her ethereal charm. But among the servants, those who changed her linen, who emptied her bathwater, who prepared her meals, rumors grew like fungus. They whispered of the queen's private chambers, always locked, always cold, of the sweet, cloying odor that wafted from under the door, of the butcher who was paid handsomely, not for fresh game, but for retrieving bodies, not newly dead, but long preserved. At first, it was thought she practiced a form of mummification. Historians scoffed. Some say she fled, taking her secrets with her. Some say she was slain by her own son, a gruesome end to a gruesome reign. If this tale has chilled you to the bone and you'd like to shiver some more, and then there were none. A while back, I asked you all to send me stories you'd found both fascinating and disturbing. This was one of those, submitted by user Secret Agent Squirrel. It is about a queen who used dark magic to gain immortality and whose evil eventually spread across the land itself. We covered exactly this story in our episode about hags, but here we see a similar tale told much more briefly. What I find most interesting here is how we get to the hag. Normally, a hag is born of some primal force of nature, a spirit of decay or blight who chooses a mortal vessel and twists it into something monstrous. But here, Margaret chooses immortality. She takes her power from the same sources of beauty, the attention and adoration of others, and rather than embracing the natural order of things, she tries to defy it, sucking the life out of the world around her until she becomes an immortal queen in a land of the dead. If that sounds like the sort of thing that might fit right in with our episodes on vampires and liches, well, that's because it is. Did this story creep you out? Would you read more like it? Let me know in the comments down below. And while you do that, I'll remind you that our show is brought to you by our patrons, the very people who made it possible for me to comb through dozens and dozens of creepypastas, to find the best of the best to share with you all. And if you want to see your name at the end of episodes like this one, then you too can support us. Just head on over to our support page to sign up. It's quick, it's easy, and it helps us make the show better. You can even get nifty rewards like submitting a monster for us to cover in the first place. So, what are you waiting for? Go check it out. Welcome to our show about monsters. I'm your host. To understand what drove Queen Margaret to such abominable acts, one must look further back to her youth and the shadow cast by her mother, Lady Elizabeth of Moranwald. Elizabeth was a woman obsessed with the transience of beauty. She often told her daughter, "All power dies when beauty fades." Margaret, a sickly child with hair like straw and skin marked by rash and freckle, learned quickly that love was rationed by appearances. At court, she was shunned. Even courtiers paid to flatter her found their tongues twisted in awkward silence. But Margaret was clever. She studied alchemy, poetry, and the strange art of Egyptian embalming. It was during one of these studies that she encountered the Book of Stillness, an obscure manuscript supposedly written by a 9th century Moorish necromancer. In it were rituals not of resurrection, but of preservation, not to cheat death but to seduce it, consume it and wear it like a mask. After the sudden death of her mother found mummified in her own bed, though no embalming was recorded, Margaret rose swiftly in stature. Her body changed, her beauty bloomed in a manner unnatural, her voice deepened, yet became more melodic, her breath strangely cold. She married Prince Alaric of Elmsbrook in the spring of 1546. Within a year, the entire royal family, his parents to brothers and their wives, were dead. Some said it was the pox, others that Margaret poisoned their wine. But the physicians' ledgers noted something unusual. Not one body was ever buried, preserved for private interment, the official record read. But no tombs could be found, no urns, no monuments, and so she ruled alone, untouched, seemingly ageless. But with every passing year, her habits grew more eccentric. She bathed in oils mixed with crushed myrrh and bone dust. She wore gloves at all times, claiming the sun ate at her fingers. She ate only behind locked doors, and forbade any servant from entering her chambers without 3 days' notice. It was said that once a year, during the coldest night of January, she would descend into the castle catacombs alone, bearing a golden goblet and a carving knife. No one followed her. Those who did 3 guards over to decades were found months later, dead in the woods, their mouths stuffed with rotted linens, eyes bound shut with wax. Her rule endured for nearly 50 years. No war touched Elmsbrook, no plague entered its gates, but the land itself grew sick. Cattle miscarried, children were born with hollow eyes, trees near the castle shed bark like skin, and through it all, Margaret remained smiling, pale, perfect, until one night in 1603, she vanished. No announcement, no body, only a single page torn from the Book of Stillness, found upon her pillow. On it, one phrase, "To become eternal, one must feed upon what time has already claimed." Say, would you look at that? But what do you think? And then she tasted death, which is the worst kind of curse for a queen to have without heirs. The nobles turned on one another, igniting a brief but savage civil war. The castle was looted. For centuries, the villagers avoided the castle ruins, convinced that within its crumbling walls, the queen was kept up by unholy powers, waiting for her moment to rise again. Time passed, legends faded, and the Queen of Elmsbrook became nothing more than a name on an old scroll, a footnote in a book about witchcraft, a clogged goblet still stained red on a nearby table. and it reflected, strangely, not what was there, but what had once been a queen, a throne, a mouth that never closed. One of the explorers, a man named Valentin Drexler, wrote in his journal that as he stared into the mirror, he felt an overwhelming hunger, not his own, but someone else's. A cold presence brushed against his neck, a whisper that crawled into his thoughts. I remember you, and behind glass jars, rows upon rows of glass jars containing what could only be described as preserved human hearts. The windows were boarded up from the inside, an amalgamation of vampire folklore, medieval propaganda and xenophobic fear. What is youth when it is stolen from corpses? Perhaps Queen Margaret was not mad. Perhaps she simply knew the secret. None of us dare say aloud, that time does not kill us. It devours us, and some like her learn to devour it back. Yet paintings of her, found in ruined abbeys and private collections, still carry an unsettling presence. Her eyes follow. Her smile lingers, and in some forgotten villages near the old Elmsbrook woods, candles are still lit once a year, not in prayer, in warning, because some believe she still walks, that her hunger never truly died, that in every morgue, missing a cadaver, in every mausoleum sealed to late, she is there, somewhere kneeling beside the dead with reverence and hunger and love. Food lay rotting on the floor beside him, and his lips were stained brown. The few coherent words he managed to write in his final note. She is not gone. She waits in the marrow of history. Some were blackened, others pale and suspended in oils and powders. The explorers felt a wave of nausea but pushed on, compelled by some unseen force to the far wall where a full-length mirror stood over 7 feet tall. Framed in bone and silver leaf, its library burned, its chapel desecrated, but the Queen's private quarters were left untouched. But eventually it gave way, and the explorers descended into the Queen's private chambers, expecting to find the source of the curse, whatever form it might take. Instead, they found a room frozen in dust. The air was stagnant, heavy with the scent of decay and something else, something sweet like rotting fruit. Sealed behind an iron door etched with Latin, mortem sapit, she tastes of death, because it took away her peace and turned her into a monster. They called her the Vampire Queen, although that wasn't really her name. Her name was Margaret, or at least that's what the servants called her when they weren't too afraid, because when Queen Margaret first came to the village of Elmbrook, she brought with her a retinue of whispers, rumors of blood drinking and grave robbing, of black masses and unholy pacts. The locals didn't know if she was a witch or a demon, but they agreed she was cursed. Elmsbrook fell swiftly after her disappearance. Then there was silence, but in the late 1800s, curiosity bloomed again. A group of European occultists heard the old tales and set out to find the truth. Legends spoke of unimaginable horrors of necromancy and royal cannibalism, and perhaps there was a grain of truth in all of it. They bribed their way into what remained of the castle, determined to uncover the dark secret hidden behind the iron door. It took days to pry open the thick metal. There was a single silver chair overturned near the hearth. Unlike the rest of the room, it was spotless, gleaming as though someone had just breathed on the glass. Days later, Drexler was found dead in his Berlin apartment, starved to death. Historians dismissed the Queen of Elmsbrook as a myth, and so the question remains, what is beauty when bought with horror? Thank you for watching.